and I kind of like overcast myself. There's like more variety.
Mm.
I just hit the recording button because I thought if we should say random funny things, we should say them for other people, I suppose.
Right.
But yeah, so we all know we're talking about The Shining here. I'll introduce everyone to it so we can get it going. I'll just make sure that is looking at the live stream. Well, about the live stream, it would be really fun. Oh, it is working.
Your audio
Uh,
is
yeah, your audio dropped off.
I did.
yeah.
Yeah, like it's a bare.
You can't hear me anymore.
Oh,
I
you're
can hear
back.
you now.
That's so weird. Anyway, so yeah, so I'll have to edit all that me being stupid out. But anyway, tonight on the left of the projector, we are talking about the Stanley Kubrick movie The Shining, which came out in 1980 and is based on a Stephen King book, or maybe we could say loosely based. We'll see how that plays out. And joining me on the podcast, I have Hugo, I have Jolly, and I have Joe Mayall. Thank you all for coming on today.
Pleasure to be here.
Hugo
I
is
said
it?
welcome back.
I was gonna say
I was
Hugo is
expecting you to
it.
say it's Snake, that you're Snake. Hugo,
That's what I did the last one. No,
yeah,
I was
last
gonna
time
say.
we discussed Escape from LA, so a little throwback. But yeah, so this is this will be part of our Halloween, spooky month. I feel like not doing The Shining would be kind of a travesty. I didn't do it last year, so I have to do it this year. I haven't read the book for a long time, but I watched the movie a couple times in preparation. I don't know what anyone's sort of like general impressions of this movie. I mean, in my estimation, it's a 5-star film. We'll talk about more.
Yes, one of my favorites. I've always loved this movie. I've loved it as a little kid, and I didn't know what was going on, and I hadn't read all the books. I didn't even know it was based on a book when I first saw it, and I thought it was great. And just rewatching it was great too, right? Like I had a great time just watching it. Like 3 days to watch it.
I love this movie. In full transparency, I thought I had seen this movie when I was a kid. And then when I started watching it last night, I realized what I had actually seen was the miniseries Stephen King made because he was so pissed off about this movie. So I got this surprise. But I loved it. I'm gonna go ahead and say I have read the book just so everyone knows I can read and that I'm literate, not to brag. But one thing I think is super cool is that like I think this movie and the book are both really, really good for different reasons. I think they're a little bit of like different genres, and I know that Stephen King like hates this movie because it's not super true to the book, but I kind of like that. I think it's totally fine that it went in a different direction, and I think it kind of creates like two separate pieces of art that are both enjoyable in their own right.
Yeah, no, that's really accurate. I too have read the book, so I too can claim literacy. Um, and I think I saw the movie for the first time when I was in like second grade or something. It was a really long time ago, but I loved it then, and I love it now. I've probably watched it at least 2 billion times throughout my life. And yeah, I mean the book and the movie are different genres. I like that you said that. Because the movie is very much like a psychological horror, and the book is very supernatural, ghosts and things like that. So it's pretty big distinction as far as horror genres are concerned.
Yeah, that was one thing I was actually going to say to people if they had read the book. Like, I don't feel like the movie was at all like the ghost story that I remember reading. It's much more. I don't know, and it's funny. Like I feel like that the book is more along the lines of just like the Stephen King kind of style. Like that's what it is, and the movie is again, it's like Stanley Kubrick left his, his fingerprints all over this movie in the 500 bazillion takes apparently he needed to make this movie. But yeah, I think what makes the movie so good, I feel like the just like in most horror movies, like the music is like the most integral part. Like as you're just watching the opening credits and them he's winding, going up to see do his little interview and the whole thing. Like the music is it's just so fucking good. It's so perfect and like sets you into that ominous mode where I feel like it's not the kind of music you would hear in like a ghost story. I'm glad he did this because the movie is it's just I'm just gonna say it's so good a bunch of times. You guys to deal with that.
Yeah,
the music
I
really
use
helps
that
set the
music.
whole.
Go.
I was just gonna say that the music really helps put forward the whole anticipation undertone that's there the entire movie, the slow burn of the descent into madness that they show with Jack Nicholson's character. Yeah, I like that the soundtrack is like, I don't even know what to call it, noise music, I think they call it these days. You like put a microwave up to a like a microphone and then it's just kind of like static noise. Yeah.
I
It's
was
like you
gonna
kind
say
of like feel your heart and your brain like tingling.
yeah. I use anytime I see something where I'm like, okay, or I'm like panning through a forest, I immediately think of that music, and I'll post a story on my Instagram story with that soundtrack. My dog walking through a hallway, like with the slow zoom.
With the shot
Single time I like watch over and over like genius. I'm literally Hugo Kubrick. Like I am amazing. And I feel like that's so epic that the soundtrack has had that much of an impact on my life that no matter what hallway I'm walking down, I think of that music. Like it just pops into my head. Or if I'm walking through the fall, or if I'm gonna get murdered by my dad.
Like when your dad chases you with an axe when you're a kid, like that. We've all been there.
Yeah, it happens to all of us,
Yeah.
We can all
Cue the
relate to
music.
that
Yeah.
music.
Well, the thing about the I know like I feel like the interview is like almost I don't want to call it like a throwaway part. I mean, it's sort of just like the intro. I feel like I would catch this movie on TV sometime when I was younger or watch it. I wouldn't always kind of not skip the beginning, but I feel like the beginnings of movies are always like parts where I don't always catch them for whatever reason. But I feel like the interview is like pretty interesting when I'm like watching this like kind of closely watching it, like the language that that they're using for it and kind of how they describe the job. Like they're very much describing the job as like any moron could do this job. But then we see later is that Jack doesn't actually do any of the actual tasks. Like, he makes his wife do all of the fucking work. He doesn't do any of the boiler room, whatever. He doesn't cook. He doesn't do anything. Like the dude is just in there with his thoughts, like getting ready to just kill a bunch of people.
I thought that was an interesting change. So like, what I learned in kind of poking around for this is that Kubrick only agreed to direct it if he could change whatever he wanted. And so like I'm very like interested about what parts he decided to leave out, because in the book, like Jack is like doing all that. It's very clear he has a job and he's like trying to like like kind of build himself back up from his alcoholism, and like you mentioned, Evan, a big part of that is the boiler room, right? He's like he has to release the valve, which of course is like a metaphor for his own internal about to explode and stuff, and that's like not existent in the movie at all. And I thought it's not like they didn't have the technology to like make a boiler. I'm pretty sure they show the boiler room at one point, and I think Wendy is in it. And so I was I don't know. I was kind of curious what everyone else thinks of like why they made that choice. And like there's shots of, I think right away, the only thing we see Jack doing is writing and then like throwing a tennis ball at the wall next to like what is probably a very expensive painting. So yeah, I guess that's kind of a question for the group of like, why do y'all think that he just kind of cut all that out?
I think that Stanley Kubrick, a lot of the choices and changes that he made centered around patriarchal misogyny, and the fact that Wendy is doing all of the work while he's allowed to just sort of kick back and attend to his preconceived genius, his important writing work, is kind of a representation of that. He's doing important things and he can't be bothered with the drudgery of the day-to-day tasks that he said he would perform, which is quite interesting because he often uses his responsibilities as an excuse why he can't tend to his son's psychosis or to his wife's anxiety.
Yeah. That about sums it up.
And also, the other thing I was going to say is like a big part of this, the Kubrick, Stephen King was struggling with alcoholism and addiction. And I think you could really see that Jack is a dry alcoholic. He is stopped drinking, but he needs a drink. Like, if anything, drinking is like, you know what I mean? Because it loosens him up. And he is in such a bad mood. And I think Jack Nicholson did a really good job because he never seems like actually happy at any point. Even when he's doing the interview, he's like fake nice. You know what I mean? And then as they're driving up, so like it's exactly what Jolly was saying. It's just patriarchy. I have so much on my shoulders, and he puts all the blame on Wendy and the kid, and he's just such a he's such a snob. He thinks he has the toughest job in the world, but it's because of his alcoholism. You know what I mean? It's like he's literally about to blow, any second. And like that's like the feeling that I got from him right from the beginning, especially rewatching it. Like you can see when they're driving up, everything's like, well he's hungry. Well, you should have eaten all your breakfast. You know what I mean? He's just so freaking angry. Freaking people wouldn't have fired me from the teaching job. I lost that teaching. Oh my god. Anyway, sorry, I'm getting off track. But yes.
Yeah, Hugo. Hugo, it's funny you mentioned the drive up because the moment I kind of realized, like, oh, this is a slightly different character than what's in the book was when he tells his kid about the Donner Party, where like the people they had to resort to like mass cannibalism, and his wife is very reasonably like, hey, don't tell our 6-year-old about like one of the most disgusting, horrific events in U.S. history, and he's like, woman, like. Oh, so crazy. Yeah.
What's so funny is that the kid's like, yeah, I know about cannibalism.
Yeah.
It's not on TV.
Yeah, it's very clear. You mentioned like just in passing the TV that like the only thing that the kid really has is like TV. Like I realize his mother is caring for him, and she was briefly in, like they tell that doctor that he was briefly in like preschool or whatever, but clearly. Like TV, like throughout the movie is too, like he's watching TV. That's his, like, only, because his father's clearly fucking absent, so he's got the TV there to.
Wendy's always with him watching the TV.
She is watching with him.
Companionship, to some extent.
Yeah, he just needs a hug. Jesus, it's like the scene later in the movie where like Jack he goes in to get his toy or something, and like he sits in like his dad's lap, like he doesn't even like really like hug him. He just kind of like sitting there with him, like I don't know, like he's
uncomfortable in his dad's lap too. He does not seem. It's a cold conversation. It's very uncomfortable to watch.
Oh god, that scene, like among others, is very uncomfortable. Yeah, and so the other thing too that like adds to it for anyone who maybe hasn't seen this movie is they tell him during the interview that like there had been like a tragedy there in 1970 where the previous caretaker like chopped up his family, including the two daughters and his like wife. And I think it's very bizarre that they would tell him this like at the
Mhm.
interview, but I guess it's like, in full disclosure, our lawyers have told us we have to share this information with you, kind of thing. I don't
Yeah, I
know.
think they would have to, right? Or is that only when you're buying property?
I don't know. I'm not a lawyer.
No.
Well,
I'm not.
I think I don't think I don't think a job is required to tell you that. Just because my job, like 7 people that have worked before me have killed themselves doing my. My job's like really depressing anyway. But no one's like, hey Hugo, just so. I think this is one of the parts where as soon as right in the interview, I was thinking right off the bat like how this is like a capitalistic thing, right? I have no choice but to take this job. Like, I don't care if the guy chopped up his family. I don't care what the risks are. I need the money because I just got fired from my teaching job and I have to write this book. And this is provide for my family while I do this thing that I love, right? Like, he wants to write a book, but he can't be a novelist. He doesn't have time to do that because he has to, like, go to work every day, 40 hours a week. This is the perfect job. I'm going to get paid to loan and be at peace, you know? So, like, such a like only like a poor working class person would be like, yeah, no, you people died here. The last guy murdered his family. It's okay. I'll take it anyway.
Where do I
I
sign?
promise I won't murder my family. Hopefully.
Yeah, I think he even mentions once in his when he's screaming at Wendy, he's like, "Oh, like, do you want me to go like demean myself, like working at a car wash or something like that?" Like, it's very clear this is his only option. And I don't know what the lore is in the movie, but I'm pretty sure in the book he like beat the shit out of a student or something. Didn't he like hit a kid at the school or something?
With his car when he was drunk, I think. It's been
Something
a long
like that. Yeah.
I think something tells me that he hit a kid with his car because he was drinking at work, but I could be mixing up something with Doctor Sleep too, because I read them sort of together.
Yeah. I think you're right, Jolly, and I think it's like
Yeah.
movies are tough because you have so much less time to like tell the backstory, but I thought, Kubrick did a good job of being like, in addition to, his alcoholism, his descent into madness, like this is their only recourse, which is actually something where I feel like it comes up a lot in horror movies of I think it's like, Sinister or something like that, where like, or the classic story of like a family buys a house, moves into a house, and it's haunted, and like can't afford to leave, right? They like have discussions of like, where are we gonna go? And um, it felt really like present in this one of like, oh, like, aside from the, I think they said 20 feet of snow, like if they go back to Boulder, like they're going to be in miserable poverty. Yeah.
Yeah, I think he
Yeah,
specifically says I'm going to be shoveling out driveways, working at a car wash. That's like the worst thing, because that's it. Those are the only options I have now. So yeah, it's the same thing. I was thinking that too. Like in horror movies, well, we can't move. We got to live with the ghosts. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
And actually, in that vein, if anyone hasn't seen the movie or read the book Burnt Offerings, it's like very much a similar kind of tale, where like a family living in like a really crowded apartment in New York that gets like a too good to be true offer to like rent a house like in the country, and it's it's interesting. Yeah, anyone out there should listen to.
I'm writing
you
it
can listen
down.
to the book,
So
you can read the book, you can watch the movie.
it's a
Anyway.
book.
Yep.
Burnt Offerings.
It's very good. But that's I digress. The other thing that we also see like early in this movie, less I think my recollection of the book is that this doesn't happen yet. Maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong. Is very early, like in the movie, you already get like these, like the episode that the son has, Danny, like seeing the flowing blood like through the hallway, and then he kind of blacks out, and then they kind of go through kind of quickly giving like the story of this kid has some, I don't want to say issues, feels like it's like glossing over, like he has, I don't know how you like, what's
He's a
that?
medium. He's a psychic.
Yeah,
guess
he has
that
like the ability
fine.
to like transmit like future and past events in some like really horrifying way, and so you already give you like, it's funny, like in a lot of horror movies they don't get to like the scary thing that happens 30, 40, 50 minutes in, but they give you that like glimpse early on. And I feel like that's like a rarity in like a horror movie where you get that like quick flash and you're like, this is going to be a fucked up thing that's going to happen.
I mean, the second he starts talking with the Tony, it's unnerving in my opinion. His imaginary friend's fucking creepy, dude. And then he proceeds to be the catalyst to his psychic sort of premonitions. Have you guys watched or read the epilogue or whatever, the next book, Doctor Sleep?
I read the book
really
ages
good.
ago. I don't remember.
So Hugo, then you know that Tony is actually himself talking to himself from the future. That's who Tony is. It's him, but an adult warning him about all the shit about the hotel.
Which actually makes like that being like a vessel to like the future exactly what it is.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's what it is.
Very
like
good.
it's he's like ability to just like see stuff before it happens. That's why he's showing us this, which I think Kubrick did a good job. I mean, obviously it was like he had these like amazing shots, and he's like, I'm gonna give these fuckers a quick glimpse of my fucking blood coming out of the oh man, like, and there's so many good shots of just Jack Nicholson just sitting there watching bar, like watching them play outside, and he's just like this. There's just so many good shots. And the twins, like, give me more twins, especially when it flashes to them standing there dead.
Wait, you have a note about that, Jolly. You should tell everyone the little the little thing. No?
Oh, the plot hole that I discovered when I watched it earlier today.
Do tell.
During the interview, he's talking to the guy who's going to give him the job, and he's telling him about Grady and the tragedy that happened. And he says that Grady brought his two daughters, who are 8 and 10, but they're depicted as twins. So it was just a script fumble. Which Kubrick, no. His dedication to perfection is unacceptable.
Wait. They
don't not actually twins though. One of them they could be 8 and 10. Not that. No, but you're right. They're not. The height difference is very slight.
In the book, they're not twins. They're not.
Okay.
However, in the movie, I feel like it's universally accepted that it's the twins, the creepy twins. Like when you think of The Shining, you think of the twins.
I mean, IMDb says Grady twins. Like that's how it's written as the.
Go. Okay. Dolly's right. You're right. Good observation. I was just gonna say they never say the word. We think they're twins because they're dressed the same. But I was also gonna say, me and my little cousin, I have plenty of pictures when we were kids. We were 2 years apart, and they dressed us the same. They dressed us exactly the same and took us to Disney World in matching outfits. And we're not the same age, and we're not twins. So
that's not cool. You can't dress your kids the same. That's that's like a big red flag for me. That's
it gives thing 1 and thing 2 from Dr. Seuss. We can't be doing it.
I have 2 kids, and I would never ever do that.
I don't know why they thought it was super cute. Dress us up the same, like we were both, and they shaved both of us. Like we both have brand new shaved heads, same outfits. Oh my God.
See, the Grady family dressed their kids identically, and look what happened to them.
Yeah. Big red flag. You're gonna get chopped up.
Actually, spoiler alert, I'm actually dead. I'm a ghost. You got me.
Well, the thing that I think part of this, one of the theories that I was reading about, like a couple articles about it, and it comes to play like when they first arrive at the Overlook Hotel, and they're going through like the different tours. So like Danny is like kind of talking to what's the I'm blanking on his name now. Dick Halloran, like the chef there. And did I say his name wrong? Halloran?
I think that's right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, Dick
And
Halloran.
so like he's having their conversation, which we think we should definitely talk about, like the little shining part, the shine. But the part that I'm thinking about is when they're kind of giving him the tour of the whole place, like how fancy it is. They're like talking up all these things. And I'm thinking 2 things. One, this like working class guy who has to take this job is like walking around this like glamorous, expensive hotel, like being like, I don't give a fuck about any of these things. Like this is the only way I'll ever even be inside of this hotel, is like to be here working, for one. And then the other thing is that they mentioned that it's built on an Indian burial ground, or That's what they refer to as, but it's Native American indigenous burial ground, which I think I read a theory saying that this entire movie is like a metaphor or a version of the Americans just murdering all the indigenous people when they came to this land. So I don't know what people think
I
about that
think
theory.
that is a reach, to be honest with you.
Okay.
Because Stephen King just so happens to have a weird obsession with putting Indian burial grounds in his book.
He
did
definitely
it in Pet
does.
Cemetery, he did it in Rose Red, he did it in Cujo, and he did it here. It was like this weird horror trope that was born in the 70s, and everyone, I mean, I think it's kind of politically incorrect to do it anyway. It feels like cultural appropriation mixed with a kind of like salt in the wound sort of slap, taking their sacred practices and turning them into our little ghost stories.
Yeah, that's fair.
It's not too cute, in my opinion, and I kind of wish he wouldn't do it so often in his literature.
I agree. I found the so I can't remember if I said this before we started recording, but I live in Colorado, not too far from like the area this is based on, but I'm from Massachusetts, and down the street was like an actual Native American burial ground, and it was always kind of talked about as like, the like mysticism and like this like weird like paganism that like was like this supposed to be this spooky thing, and throughout literature it's always kind of been like, it reminds me of when I hear about like how in the years of America's founding, people like just didn't understand Native Americans, right? Like thought they were savages, thought their whole way was backwards and stuff like that. And it kind of always struck me the Indian burial ground trope as this like, like there's something else going on with these people. Like they're not entirely like us. They're a little bit different. I do know that like this movie doesn't really super well explain like how the supernatural stuff is going on. I felt that was kind of like a throwaway line to like, and Kubrick wanted to be like every viewer gets their own different interpretation of what's going on here, and that was one that like could come up.
Yeah.
But that trope has always, I agree, Jolly. It's always kind of sat weird with me of like, drawing on that old like 1700 superstition that like these people are not Christians, they're like doomed to walk the earth when they die because they don't accept Jesus, like that sort of stuff.
Their sacred lands produce mass tragedies and
for
horrors
sure.
for decades to come.
Yeah, right.
I feel like this movie in general, like if you go onto YouTube and you type in like The Shining theory, there are like hundreds of videos. I went down the route. I didn't like watch full ones. I like sometimes would just kind of quickly listen to like the intro. It is an insane amount of theory. So because of that, like you're going to get lots of things, but it came up in the Wikipedia page, which is why it like caught my attention. And like they have a bunch of reasons why they say it's similar to Native American ethnic cleansing kind of thing, but we don't need to like go into the things that they say. But that was like one of the theories. And then the other theory that I actually read an article about was that this movie is an allegory for American imperialism, which I could actually maybe see a little bit more than the other things. But again, I feel like in some sense it's definitely a stretch. Again, like I don't think that that's what Stanley Kubrick was going for. I think you're right. I think he likes to build movies where there's just like different ways you can interpret this, and like we'll never tell you. I mean, he's gone now, but he never would tell anyone what anything means because it's more fun that way.
Yeah. Evan, can I ask about the imperialism theory?
Yeah, so
I'd
this
love to
is an
hear that.
article. It came out in 2004 by someone named John Capo. I have it open. I'll just read like one or two lines from it just so you can see what he says. So he says, throughout the film, we learn three pieces of information central to the film's thematic progression. First, the Overlook has quite a sordid past, and remnants of past still linger in the hallways and guest rooms of the hotel. Next, that his son, Danny, has a form of extrasensory perception, not to mention his own alter ego. And then central, we discover that when we give him the chance, the forces of evil will drive humankind to commit inhumane acts, which I think that's part of his like theory in this, is that like it's like the family is very dysfunctional, and it kind of like is a metaphor in some way of like a dysfunctional society. which I guess you could argue is true, but again, it's still a bit of a stretch.
Hey man, art is subjective.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he plays big on this article, goes really deep into the very final shot of the movie, which we can talk about now or later, is the zooming in of the black and white photo from 1921, July 4th. And the fact that it's specifically, they choose July 4th, like this American independence, like celebration of white people at this rich country club. And that's just his theory. You know, I'm not telling you it's correct. I'm just reporting here.
There is. I didn't even think of that. I just remembered that the sign where he's like, he's called someone here, and he says the N chef. I'm not going to say it because he says it with a hard R, but like specific, the N-word chef. Like he's coming.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I was thinking, so maybe it's the people instead of Indian burial grounds. Like I think it's these rich white people who have spent their entire lives, just like partying and going to. They're the ones that can't get into heaven or whatever, and also with exorcisms, like every time there's an exorcism movie, it like feeds off of like pain and like anyone that's suffering, and there's already like this drama in the family with Jack, hitting his kid, which is the reason he's not drinking, or like breaking his shoulder, hold him. So I feel like he already has that anger in him. So the demons, the ghosts, whatever, in the hotel are like, oh, we could use this fucker. He's a fucking maniac anyway. You know what I mean? He's like willing to do it.
Yeah, and in the book, the hotel is like its own character, and Stephen King actually really depicts the hotel literally infiltrating his mind and taking him bit by bit until he is one with the boiler room.
Yeah.
So that checks out.
I do want to know, I want to come back to what Hugo just said, because I do think the way that like the one black character is depicted in this movie is like a big issue. But what Jolly just said really reminded me of something I was thinking, where in the book, right, like I think you're spot on, Jolly, where like the hotel is a character. In the movie, what really struck me was how empty the hotel feels. Like, and before we started recording, Evan, you said that like they built the sets like that's not actually what the hotel looks like, which is pretty crazy because, whether he's in his writing room or he's in the bar or the lobby, there are these massive like high ceiling empty rooms that stretch on forever, and it's very clear where the way the camera like rolls up to Jack or it tracks him, like he is alone in this massive glorious institution. Even in like when he's I don't know if you'd call it a hallucination, but he goes to the bar and it's like that 1920s or whatever party. He's very clearly alone. No one's talking to him. He is not dressed like any of them. And no matter like where you look, or when he's throwing the ball at the wall and it's this huge echo, right? Like Kubrick is just really trying to, like, in my opinion, cement that this guy is isolated. He's alone. He doesn't know what to do. My interpretation of that is, and I think this is kind of where King and Kubrick vary, is I think what Kubrick's trying to say is, it's really isolating to do anything sort of creative in a capitalist society, of like trying to write a book while also trying to like pay the bills and do this job, etc., etc. And Jack, like takes this out on his wife, right? Like his wife walks up and it's just like, it's gonna snow, and he like tells her to fuck off, and he's a terrible guy. And I think like both of them probably experienced that. As someone who like is trying to do creative stuff to make a living, like that isolation could be like pretty real, of like everyone else is working a 9 to 5, right? And it's like, trying to write on off hours and stuff. That was the way I interpreted it, and I thought it was very interesting how they both had these different perspectives of the hotel and wanted to play a different role in the movie.
Yeah, and to play off of like the isolation thing that you mentioned and how it can intertwine with sort of like doing creative ventures in a capitalist model. Also the isolation of the individualism that we all experience
exactly
within that sort of paradigm, where you are alone. It is you versus the system in capitalist competition, and how he takes that out on his wife is also interladen with the patriarchy that we mentioned earlier. And we all know that class antagonisms like that are intertwined with individualism and monopoly capitalism. And
Yep.
yeah.
For sure.
And what you mentioned the chef character, and well, before I maybe go back to that, one of the other pieces that I forgot to mention from this article that was interesting is when he first goes into the bar the very first time and he's having that conversation, and he's like, I mean, he's fantasizing about having a drink. Like, this guy needs a drink real bad, and he's fantasizing about it hard. So he mentions a specific poem, the Rudyard Kipling poem, and it's called White Man's Burden. And apparently the actual poem is about historical belief that there is like the duty or burden of white men to spread their ideals to people. And it's specifically, I believe, about the Philippines. So, like, there's no accident, one, to choose that poem, too. And I feel like it also fits partly into what you're saying, Jolly. It's like he is there to create as, like, this superior male. Like, I have to write this book, you know, this genius book, and, like, spread my ideals across the world. And if I don't, then
What a
you know,
burden.
yeah, I'm gonna kill you all if you don't.
Right. I'll correct them.
So yeah,
Evan, it's funny you brought that up. That was something because it seemed to come out of nowhere where he just got the whiskey and he was like, "White man's burden," right? And I was like, I rewounded it. I was like, did he just say that? But it might it goes into your imperialism narrative theory. Like, I think if I remember my history class correctly, like that kind of came up after the Spanish-American War, where you know I'm quoting here, listeners. Liberated the Philippines from Spain, and then, you know, the imperialist government wanted to obviously take it, so they were like, oh, well, come on, American citizens, as white men, we have this burden, right? We can't just let these Filipinos govern themselves, like, you know, like super racist colonial narrative. I had no idea it was a poem, because I just wrote down, like, white man's burden, question mark? Like, where the fuck did that come from?
It does come out of, like, left field a little bit.
Yeah.
It's macabre that it's a poem.
Yeah.
I didn't read the poem because I'm not, maybe I'm not a masochist. I don't know.
I'm going to have to read it.
But I feel like now I have to look it up. But I don't know. So I guess we're like talking about the chef, I think worth talking about, or the cook, whatever they refer to him as. You know, he clearly has this, like, he refers to it as the shine, like that the boy and him can have this, like, connection that they don't understand. And I feel like it's weird. Like, the kid is really kind of, like, scared and tentative talking to him about it, because he's probably the first person that's ever actually understood him in some way. And it's like even more gut wrenching, like when he comes back and is literally like gets the axe right in the gut. You know, like the father is literally killing like the one person who understands his son, which makes it even like doubly tragic.
Yeah, I feel super bad for him too, because remember, he's on vacation. Like, he works all winter, and then for summer he goes down to Florida, and he's old too. Also, just before we jump away from him, can we just talk about the paintings in his room?
Yes.
It's just like, but I will say, okay, so one thing, as I think the thing is, as an American, we have like, why he got titties on his wall? Just bare ass titties with the biggest afro I've ever seen in my life, right? But when you really, it is just like African art, and you know, it might free the nipple. You know what I mean? Like, we don't have to act so like, I don't need to be a prude. Every time I see boobies, I'm like, oh god, you know? It's just like, oh, like, it's just art. She's sitting there with a big old afro, you know, and then behind him too. But yeah, he's on vacation in Florida, and he gets up and flies into the cold and drives through the fucking snowstorm with chains on his tires. He walks in, hello, dead. Like, poor guy. Like, really? Oh my god.
Talk about no good deed goes unpunished, am I right?
Seriously, gotta kill the brother off, man. Damn.
Oh man, is he the first to die too?
Yes, he is.
Yeah.
Yes. Always. Always.
There are too many tropes in The Shining.
So Hugo, I think what you said is like really on point. But like as a white guy watching this, like when I saw the painting, I just thought that was like just a sign that like when they were making this movie, like there's no black people on set besides this actor. Like and like the set designer was like, oh god, we gotta like show that this is a black guy's house. Black guys like naked black chicks, and black chicks have afros that are like 60% the size of their bodies. Because he's just sitting there watching the news. It's like a chill like Tuesday evening for him. He's like, yep, just looking at my black titties. You know how it is. But like this was the one, and I'm curious what everyone else thinks, because this was like the one I guess demerit I have against this movie, where one, I do think it's like pretty sexist in how it reduced Wendy just to sort of this like hysterical character as opposed to like someone with agency, and then also reduced Dick, who in the book is like very much as Jack slips off and becomes a shitty father, like steps up and becomes like a father figure for Doc, the kid, who he calls him. And I'm pretty sure the book ends by Dick like supporting Wendy and Danny the kid. In the epilogue, they're like at a hotel in Maine, and I kind of wonder if they were like, a 1980s American audience is not going to like a black guy like replacing the white father. That was my thought, because in the movie, like they go through this whole thing, and like you were saying, he like flies from like Miami to Denver, drives 5 hours from Denver to Sidewinder, takes a snowcat up to the hotel, and immediately gets an axe to the chest. And he's really only a plot device to bring the snowcat to the hotel so that Wendy and Danny can get away, as opposed to in the book where he's like has agency and is like helping Danny like navigate this and literally like steps up. And I was kind of wondering like if you guys think that's a sign of Kubrick's racism, or like his kind of like remarking on the culture of like, because he does show this character being like super like well developed, and I would not say he's like a token at all until like they just kill him off in the last like 15 minutes. And it really felt like they went from like, oh wow, they're like, this is probably like the best I've seen a black character represented in a 1980s movie, to like, oh cool, they killed the black guy first, like back to the trope really quick. And so I'm kind of curious how everyone else interpreted that.
I think Kubrick got I don't know. I think he got lazy at the end, and maybe it was like maybe the producers and stuff also had read the novel, and well, this guy's very well developed, and they're like, no, gotta kill that nigga, bro. Like, what the fuck, you know? And like, and fucking poor like Kubrick's like, shit. Like, I already filmed all these scenes. All right, I guess I'll kill him. And like, I just feel bad. And another thing is, I got confused because I'd read the book. So in the movie, I just finished the movie like earlier today. Like I said, I watched it in parts. So I was like, he got axed in the chest, and I was like, wait, doesn't he like support Wendy? I was like, oh, he must survive. I was thinking that. I was like, oh, maybe it's not a mortal wound. And then I realized like the movie ended. I was like, oh shit. Oh well. And I guess it's because it was in the book. In the book, no, that doesn't happen. But yeah, I just think he got late. I think not got like bend the studios were happy, and I think in the end, yeah, he had to like cut it off. So yeah, that's right.
He had to conform to the capitalist, requirements for film.
Yeah.
I just so happened to not give him that kind of leniency. He helped develop the screenplay. He was there adapting the book from book into what was going to be the movie. So it wasn't like a toss up or a throwaway that he decided to kill Dick's character off. We all are aware about how he treated Shelley Duvall during the making of The Shining. We all know that one of Stephen King's biggest critiques is that he had way too much misogyny and patriarchal undertones surrounding not only her character but the story as a whole. And as far as I understand sexism, other sort of bigotry is not far to follow. So where there's going to be sexism, there is going to be racism. And I believe that the titties on the wall, probably a byproduct of that, making Dick less developed than he was in the book, byproduct of that. I feel like if he was written as a white character, he would have been put in just as written. That's what I think about Stanley Kubrick. I don't hold a lot of respect for him as a man, as a director, of course, but as a man, no, I don't care for him much. And I think that nasty side of him that is what contributed to these, in my eye, shortcomings in The Shining.
Yeah.
Jolly, now that you mention it, like, he's the only character who gets, like, physically killed on screen, right? Like, we see Jack freeze, but, like, it's funny because I kind of think of this movie as, like, a psychological thriller with, like, slasher elements, but, like, now that I'm sitting here, he's the only one who dies, and they go, like, out of the way to kill him. Like fire axe to the chest is like, oh, this guy's dead. Yeah.
It's literally like a gut punch, like, to kill him, right? Like,
yeah.
Realized him.
Yeah, it was very much like, oh, here's your blood. Like, here you go, guys. Here's what you've been waiting for, you know? The red meat, so to speak.
When he's supposed to be like a saver, and he's supposed to be like a beacon of hope, and not only in the moment at the Overlook, but beyond in the epilogue. He is a source of stability. He is a source of compassion, and they did him dirty with that act. Yeah.
I was gonna say, like, the answer to the question is, I've also read that Stanley Kubrick is, people want to be in his movies, but they don't like working with him. Like, apparently, Shelley Duvall wanted to quit this movie, like, a lot during the filming. Like, the scene where she's walking backwards up the staircase, you know, with the bat, and she hits Jack in the head. Like, that scene was filmed like 80 times. Like
127.
127. Okay.
It's in the Guinness Book of World Records.
Well, so yeah, and so he clearly, I mean, Jack Nicholson was saying he would change the lines until, like, the moment that they'd have to, like, film the scene. So, like, he wouldn't even learn the lines until right before he got on set. So it strikes me that Stanley Kubrick's way of working, unfortunately, to put what we see as an amazing work of art on screen, he puts it there with, you know, some pretty, he wasn't a good person. So to me, that it doesn't seem like what you're saying, that Jolly, it doesn't strike me as a stretch to say, like, him treating the one black character, like, kind of dirty isn't crazy, and I would buy that. And it's a shame because I think the ending in the movie is not as good as the ending in the book.
No. I agree.
I feel like that's the one piece that this movie didn't quite nail, from my recollection of the ending of the book. And just also, like, the hedge maze isn't even in the book, right? I didn't think so.
No,
Yeah.
it's, go ahead, Jolly.
It's animals. It's animal farm out in the front, bushes cut up like lions and stuff. But apparently they chose to change it because of a special effects sort of requirement. They didn't think that they could create the moving bushes that well, so they opted for the maze. That's what I understand is why he chose to do that specifically.
I will say, like, one of the coolest
Big
shots in the
photo.
movie is when Jack is in the main room and they have the model of the hedge maze, and like they zoom in and then, like, it's them walking through it. Like, that shot is pretty spectacular.
I thought that shot also went super well. Of, like, I was like, wait, does he see them walking through the maze? Like, is he watching them? Does he realize where they are? Or is that just like a camera? Like, one of those things where it's like, as an audience member, you're like, you kind of get the feeling a little bit of like, I'm not entirely sure what's going on, and you feel like Jack doesn't really know what's going on, you know, like one of those things. Yeah, I thought that was my favorite shot as well. Super well done.
And this is another question I'm curious what you all think. So it's like maybe it's a very simple question, but then like I had what kind of led me to this is so the, and again in the interview when he mentions the fact that the previous guy like murdered everyone, and he's kind of put that idea like that little idea into his head. Like, is Jack like predisposed to like being a murderer, or is it simply the like the idea again of like isolation and like how we as people are like just unfortunately led to, I guess it's to say like, are we predisposed to like this kind of violence, or is it simply like his character, the fact that he's an alcoholic, he's clearly unstable, he's then put into a super unstable place with just two people, and he's like left to his own thoughts, and he just, you know, snaps.
No, I mean, I think he
Well,
does.
in the book, it's very
No, go.
sorry.
You
In
go,
the
you
book,
go.
it's very clear that it's the ghosts in the hotel that drives him crazy. However, in the movie, to me, it seems like he is already crazy from scene one. Like, I can't remember which one of you all mentioned it, but there's the pseudo plastic niceness with the interviewer. He's kind of edgy and cold to his wife and his kid the entire time. He's facetious, and I think that he is trying not to go full Looney Tunes in the movie, and
He's holding back almost.
he's holding
Yes.
back until it just, you know, wear and
Another
tear. You
thi-
can only hold so long.
Another thing is that he's holding, and then going back to that scene in the with driving, and he starts telling Danny about the murders and the cannibalism. I was saying before, he never really looks happy, except in that moment. In that moment, like, he actually puts on a genuine smile. It's like, oh, the Donner Party, yes. You know, they ate each other. You know, and like when he starts talking about that, he actually gets this like a real, genuine smile on his face. Like, he was already in the movie, he's already kind of like messed up. And I feel like the other thing is Wendy is walking on eggshells around him the whole time. He is definitely a dry alcoholic. This is what an alcoholic does. When he's drinking, he's just like kind of like a mess. But when he's not drinking, he's just angry all the time. And Wendy, like, if you remember when she's talking to the therapist in the beginning, and she's like, it's the kind of thing you do all the time, you know? You just pull the kid up. It's like rationalizing, because she knows that, again, she has no one to support her. This is the man that is going to protect her and is going to take care of her. And like, it's the only, you know what I mean? Like, I'm sure there were not at the time, because we live in a patriarchal society, freaking guy, and she needs to be nice to him, and she needs him to keep his job, so she can't be like, yeah, my husband's a piece of shit, and he broke my son's shoulder, you know, and that's why my son is talking to his freaking finger like an idiot. So like, he's crazy, Jack, crazy, bro. And like, he walks in the hotel, and the hotel's like, hi, and he's like, oh my god, you want me to kill my family? Because I will totally kill my right away. Like, they don't even need to do anything.
He's like, they're gonna make a movie about this?
He was writing all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy for weeks. Like, he wrote that as soon as he walked in, bro. That was
like
a lot of
50
pages,
different
bro.
formats.
And isn't that a perfect representation, a manifestation of capitalism, right? All work and no play makes us all like miserable as fuck.
Yeah.
I remember, I think Hugo, as you just mentioned, like, I remember when I thought Shelley Duvall did a really good job with what she was given, and I got the sense that her character was written as like, okay, like, you're gonna walk into the room and you're gonna do the like eyes wide terror face, and like that was really everything they gave her. But I remember when she delivered the line of like, oh, my husband stopped drinking and he gave me permission to leave him if he does it again. Like, that whole framing of like, don't worry, he said it's okay to leave him, was like, okay, we're seeing the nature of this relationship here of like very controlling, very like he's in charge. She's only allowed to do like she has no agency, right? Like, um, and I know that was one of like Stephen King's critiques was the two main characters and how they're different from his book. But I think you're right, Hugo. I think that like Jack Nicholson's Jack is just different. He's in the book, like, you know, Jack is like struggling with his inner demons and he even tries to save his son at the end. In the book, I think he's just sort of like, in the movie, I think he's just a bad guy. And my kind of theory about this hotel and like what the supernatural thing is in play is it kind of susses out like who fits into its crew of like murderers and demons and stuff and tries to like lure them in, because there's plenty of people who are in the hotel who don't really like, you know, Ullman, the general manager, I guess, doesn't really show signs of like being lured in. Wendy even, but the hotel is like telling Jack to kill his family, like using like the N word, stoking on like what his racist beliefs and stuff like that. And it's like this N word wants to be your you know, take your kid away from you, that sort of stuff. That's kind of how I interpreted the like supernatural stuff. And then at the end when he dies, it's like, oh, like he's in the picture, he was part of this all along.
Well, that line of him referring, like saying that that he's gonna take his son away, is like kind of like, I mean, I assume that scene doesn't play out the same way in the book. I don't remember, but that's like proof in a way of like the theory that they were planning all along to make, you know, Dick be like this, like the patsy that was going to get, you know, brutally murdered, because they didn't want him to take his son and like support him. Like that literally is, they're like tipping it in a way of, I'd forgotten about that line. And I mean, yeah, I got the sense that like the ghosts or the thing, I think that's why the last scene with the photo kind of plays what you're saying, Joe, is that the spirits of like the scene when he goes into the party or when the bar is full, like they're all having this grand old time like in the 1920s as like, you know, we're these rich white people, and they want to like lure him into this lifestyle too. Like, you know, you can be one of us if you know, play by the rules and do the evil imperialism, going back to that, like that article, as it's, you know, you can be one of us if you're just the evil, maniacal, horrible, no morals person.
He's also super comfortable with them, right?
Yeah.
He's like at the party, like walking in, like, oh, this is the place to be, as opposed to like when he's with his family, he's just like on edge and like, get this kid away from me, I hate my wife. And then like when he like a bartender appears in front of him, he's like, oh, cool, right? Like, let's talk about the white man's burden and like use the N-word with this guy I just met. Like, it's very clear these are his people, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, also just the fact that there's alcohol involved, that also gives him that ease and comfort, because he knows like, oh, this is a nice gay crowd, like we're gonna be able to open up and like have fun. But yeah, I feel like the white man's burden line is what told the ghost, like, this guy, like, we can get him. Yep, definitely. White man's burden. Who says that? Who says burden? This is definitely a racist wife killer.
Maybe in like 1980 that was a dog whistle, even though that's like one of the things where it's like not really a dog whistle, it's just a racist thing to say. But like back then it was like wink wink, right? Like, you know.
And the poem was actually, oh, sorry.
No, I was gonna say it's the equivalent of walking into a bar and saying executed person in America right now. White
All
can't
lives
say anything
matter.
anymore, right?
Yeah.
With the like, yeah, men oppressed march.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the poem was apparently written to celebrate the Jubilee of Queen Victoria in 1897. So like, it's also like super, like, does it get any like whiter than that? Celebrating the Queen.
Anything with aristocracy is like, yeah. He pretty much was like, God save the Queen, as he like took his drink, right? But with just like more racism.
Well, one thing we didn't really talk about, which I guess is kind of, I don't want to say it's like an aside to like the plot, but I will say like the few scenes of like super cool like body horror, especially the bathroom scene, are like really, I really found like the quote unquote like scary aspects, like the beyond just like the psychological terror of this like murderous white man like stalking around a hotel, with an axe, but just like the scene in the bathroom is like super, you know, horrifying, especially when I watched it when I was like, I don't know, like 10 or 11 or something like that. I'm like, this is really unsettling. And then just like
Yeah.
the scenes of just the like when the kid is just like biking around in the halls, like I feel like that's like an iconic, one of the most iconic things about this movie is like the scene in the hallway, the twins and everything. It's like all of those psychological aspects and the things Kubrick, where he failed in being a misogynistic guy, he nailed that stuff.
Yeah, he put all his experience points of like took him away from being a decent human being and put him into cinematography, I guess. Yeah.
That's a,
He's a
that,
he's a good director.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was gonna say that's true of like every like genius person. Like all their XP is like it's just like you. So it's like they level out like all the skills, but then everything else sucks because it's like I was reading about how David Bowie and Jimmy Page like used to like sleep with groupies that were like you know what I mean, and like stuff like
Yeah.
that always like whoa, oh my god, because I was like complaining my wife loves Beyonce about like how Beyonce used private jets, and she's like yeah well, banged a kid, and I was like what, and then I went down the rabbit hole. I was like oh my god, David Bowie banged kids. Yeah, like there's a whole thing of these groupies. Like, anyway, like I feel like all of these, like, that we have like idolized, and I definitely idolize Zeppelin and stuff, and like horrible people. Yes, he's really good at making like those shots. I'm just very impressed by those shots. Also, the back really bugs me because Wendy's like, some psycho lady just tried to kill our son. He's like, I'm gonna go. Oh, she's naked, man. Like, what? And then he doesn't say a word. He just walks up to her and open mouth kisses her. Like, and just feels it. No words are exchanged. Just makes out with a strange woman who's suspected of hurting his son. What the hell?
Hugo, it's so funny you say that because I wrote down in my notes, gaslighting gets overused, but Jack is a master at it because, like, he's just like, his wife is like, did you see anything? He's like, nope, nothing.
Nope.
Nothing strange. Yep, nope, just cheated on you with a ghost.
Creepy
But
lady.
yeah, yeah, that was. I thought that was another instance of like, oh, like this is showing how he's like just a bad guy, right? Like he sees a naked chick and his first thought is like, I'm gonna have sex with her while my wife like sent me into this room because this woman just tried to strangle my 6-year-old child, so I better sleep with this chick. Like
He
just
doesn't care about
yeah.
that. Selfish. The fact that the kid was presumably strangled by the woman. It's not a care in the world because there's a nut in his future. So fuck it.
She must have had a
Yeah.
good. He's probably like she must have had a good reason. That kid's always leaving up laying around. So
He's
we
like
all
messing with my papers and shit.
Just as annoying as his mother. So fuck him.
Yeah.
He like almost disorganized by like my Jack is a dull boy lines. It's
Yeah.
good shit.
Yeah.
He
It's
saw
the
that
type
chick
of
and he's
thing you
like,
do
we
all
have a
the
lot in
time."
common. Yeah. We both like hurting my child. We should hook up.
We share common interests.
Yeah, right? There's just this connection between us of like, paternal abuse towards minors.
What's also crazy is like that is the scene right after he sees the woman is when they flash to Dick at his apartment in Miami or Florida or wherever, like sitting on his couch watching. Like that's the thing that I don't know, the shine or whatever, brings him up to attention and gets him to go there. It's like it's interesting that was the thing. I don't know. I don't know if there's any significance to it other than like that's just the point in the movie.
Well, because I think it's because it flashes back, or he talks to Tony, and Tony's like, "Hey, remember, Dick said that they're just pictures in a book. So he actually got hurt. You know what I mean? So now he's like, oh, this is not just pictures in a book. This is real. And that's when and I think in the book, that's when they actually like had a little bit of a connection. Again, I keep confusing the book because I think the last thing I did was read the book, not to watch them. I thought they were going to chat a little through their minds, like while he was in Florida, but I guess that didn't happen in the movie. So yeah, that's why I think he's like calling out to Dick, like, please help me.
Yeah, it took me a while in the movie, but I think what they were going for was, in the book, Dick is driving and he gets like a flash shining and almost crashes his car. And I think that's what like the sort of static beeping that would go on when it focused in on Danny. Like they couldn't so much as like talk, but could sort of just send those like super like powerful like I don't know, like flashes, I guess.
Right.
And I at first in the movie I was like, oh, like Dick is just gonna see that like they're in trouble because of the weather and go back. But then like the hotel is like, oh, your son is bringing him back and stuff like that. So I think they could have done it, or Kubrick could have done a better job like making that connection. But I think, or I interpret as that's what they were going for, of like just those sort of like screeches that would happen. And somebody said microwave, Jolly. I think that was you. Like hold a microwave up to the sound recording. I think that's what like they were trying to get at. In my opinion.
Here's another like thing, like what your theory is on. So Wendy eventually gets him into like the walk-in fridge, locks him in there. Is like, we need to, like, then she realizes that the other snowcat is destroyed. He's destroyed it. Do we assume that Danny let him out of the fridge, or like his thing? What do we think about that? They don't really give you anything, right?
So my thought was like that was the quote unquote hotel, and in like the book where the hotel is a tangible character, I think it makes it flows a little bit better, where it's like, okay, the hotel can actually do things, right? It can move the bushes, it can unlatch this lock. In the movie, I believe he hears the voice of I don't know what they call him, the butler, maybe, is that the right word? Butler servant guy who he goes into the bathroom with, and they're like talking, and they're like, well, your wife got the better of you, like, why should we give you this chance?
Grady, right?
Grady, yes, thank you. I took it as like, even though the hotel is like more of like, I almost view it as like a club than like an entity, than a person. Like that was it, kind of like, as all this sort of shining activity was going on, it was able to unlock him from because they do show like Wendy, I think it's like one of those locks where like you close it and then you stick the pin in it, if I'm remembering correctly. Yeah. And they like made it like very clear that this is like not something that's coming undone on its own. And so I kind of took it as like, okay, the hotel gets like one shot at like being a real boy for a day, and it's going to use it to give Jack his last chance.
I agree.
Yeah. It is one of those things that like the book makes it seem better, right? That part.
Yeah.
This is just something that I saw earlier. This is completely unrelated to like the plot of the movie, but do you guys know what the Razzies are?
Oh yeah,
like the Razzie Awards.
Yeah.
So the Razzies, Hugo, are like this. Basically, like you give it to like the worst actor kind of thing. It's like this kind of I guess it's kind of like a parody in a sense. But they apparently had given Shelley Duvall the Razzie in the 1980s for this shit, and then they rescinded it later. Like I don't know when. I didn't get like deep into it, but they had given her the Razzie. And I think that is did Kubrick like, I don't know. It's such like it's so fucked up that you would give her that. Like she was excellent in like what she did in this movie, and I feel like she doesn't get her due either. Like everyone like often will say like Jack was really good, Jack Nicholson was great, which he was in this movie. Like the way he acted is truly terrifying, but I feel like her performance is underappreciated probably by most people.
Say that like from the perspective of some like, because I do like 911 and we go to these calls a lot to like domestic disputes and stuff, and just emotionally disturbed people. And like, she looks like a woman who she really acts like someone, like not just a partner that is watching, that is kind of that is in a situation where like their loved one is a mess, and they're kind of like, she's almost trying to convince herself like that it's okay if I'm nice and I'm just polite. Like I said, the way she comes in and she's like, hi, like, it's gonna snow later, can I bring you a sandwich? And he just flips out on her, and she kind of just goes, and she walks out. Like, she did such a, that was so believable, the way she was just like, you don't be a meanie. And he's like, what the hell, like, she's like trying so freaking hard to just be nice, and it did an amazing job. Like, I'm telling you, it's just very believable, the whole way she does it. I think she was casted perfectly.
She's my favorite character. I enjoy rooting for Wendy.
Yeah,
So I believe that.
I imagine they gave her the Razzie because her like thing in this movie is like, she turns a corner and there's the ghost or the dead guy, and she does the like wide eye like and I think Jolly, you said right, like that scene with where she's up the stairs is like 127 times. I imagine she like acted like a normal person would be like, oh my god, like what? And then like Kubrick was just like, no, more, like 100 times, to the point where she just had to like permanently bulge her eyes out of her head. Like, I thought that her reactions were a little bit over the top, but I don't necessarily blame her. I imagine that was like, okay, no one is leaving this set until like I just pretend like the most terrified I've ever been. But yeah, I thought she was good. It's kind of cool to hear the Razzies rescinded it, because I've never heard of them.
I think it's the only time
before.
it's ever happened, and I think they gave it instead to Sylvester Stallone. I think for that period or something.
Can you imagine like getting a call and being like, oh, in like 2007, and being like, oh, that movie you made was actually like the worst movie of 1982, and just being like, what the fuck? Like, you didn't have to give it to me. Like, you can just take it away from her.
The Razzies are mean. They should just stop doing them.
They are.
Yeah, it's like, it's not a. I was trying to see more about it. Oh. Well, and I think it's that they're giving. I don't know as much about it. I know what they are. I think they changed it or something to like a Bruce Willis movie from 2021. I don't know. I'm like Googling it really quickly trying to see, and I don't know. Yeah.
While we're on the topic of like semi-unrelated stuff, are you guys familiar with like the moon landing conspiracies that come out of this movie?
Mm-hmm.
This movie?
Yeah. So
Shining?
yeah. So there's like a whole, and if you just, someone mentioned Reddit rabbit holes. There's like a whole theory that this is Stanley Kubrick's like admission that he shot the that he faked the moon landing.
Get out of here.
So I'm gonna run you guys through this real quick. Like,
I gotta hear this.
I'm not saying I'm a fake moon landing guy. I'm just telling you what people believe. So the big one is, at one point in the movie, Danny has an Apollo 11 jumper on, and he goes into in the movie, the haunted room is room 237. In the book, I think it's like 207 or 217, something like that.
It's 217.
217, yeah. And so like the theory is like 237 is, there's let me make sure I get this right. There's 237,000 miles between the Earth and the Moon. And so he's playing on the carpet, which, as people say, and I looked at these aerial photographs, like the design looks like the Apollo 11 launch pad, like with its hexagon. He's wearing his rocket ship, so he's in this metaphor, the rocket ship, and he goes like to 237, the 237,000 miles, which is like supposed to be the distance, or supposed to represent the moon. And besides that, like people point out that there's American flags everywhere throughout the hotel, which is like the one thing they didn't seem to take with them. Um, it seems like one of those things where people are just sort of reaching, but um, it looks like Stanley Kubrick has like kind of tongue-in-cheek fed this conspiracy theory in some interviews throughout the years of just being like, oh, that's interesting, I didn't think of that, and stuff like that. So if you guys are looking for a Reddit rabbit hole, that's just the start of it. You can find like a million more things where people will be like, this is a reference to like Operation Paperclip and how like there's something about the twins being Nazis and stuff and like helping them get there. It's a whole thing.
If anything,
yeah.
If anything, to me, I'd almost would feel like if there was already this theory that Stanley Kubrick would just like do this shit just to like feed into it, to be just like, I'm gonna do this intentionally. Like he's the kind of guy that could pull off both faking it and also faking the faking it. Like I'm gonna just mess with your heads. I don't know.
How arrogant would you have to be to plant Easter eggs about your own accomplishments in a movie, though? Like, let me make an Easter egg hunt about this thing I did for NASA. It'll be so cool.
He does seem like the guy, though, in defense of my Reddit, right. Who's like, wants everyone to know he did it, right? Yeah.
Yeah, of course.
I'm so awesome and secretive and covert. You know, got him.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
It's funny you mentioned
that's
this
the
theory.
Fake moon landing.
Because I was just recently in DC and I was at the Air and Space Museum with my mom and my family, and we were like, my mom was like, remembers watching like the moon landing like in school or whatever, like they pull up the TV or whatever and they watch it, and she was actually saying to me, she's like, now that I think about it, it is possible that they could have faked it, and she's like not a conspiracy theory person at all, but I feel like, I guess it would have made sense, like if they did it at this time, because at the museum they had a bunch of like Russian anti-Soviet propaganda being like how the U.S. had actually done all the things, and like Soviet didn't do shit. It's
like Sputnik.
Yeah, it was very funny. Yeah, they refer to like the Cold War or whatever as like a little thing between nations, or like there's some like phrasing. I don't have it. I took a picture of it because it was so ridiculous. Anyway, that's
like 50 years long.
What's that?
A little thing. Wasn't it like 50 years long, the Cold War?
Yeah, right, exactly. Like, yeah.
A slight disagreement.
Yeah, just a little tiff.
That's like
between nations.
That's like the same thing they do with the Korean War. They call it the Forgotten War. Like, no one remembers. It's forgotten. Like, yes, they do.
US wants
they remember.
We remember.
Yes.
Yeah.
Never forget.
That would be my plug for everyone to listen to the third season of Blowback, which is about the Korean War.
Oh, okay. Is it really? What is that?
Yeah, the podcast is great. But I don't know. Does anyone have any, like, are there any other theories that anyone has, or any other, like, bits that we didn't
Nothing that can hold a candle to the Apollo one.
Well, I mean, just anything about the movie that we that anyone had tucked away in their notes. They didn't get the.
No, not really.
Yeah. None of it would have happened if it wasn't for capitalism.
Yeah.
None of it would have happened. Like, if it wasn't for capitalism, as soon as they told the last people that came in here murdered his family, he would have been like, you know what? I'm going to take a different job and I'll be okay. The American, financial system, the American government will take care of me in some way, and I can do what I love, and my family will be fed and housed. But no,
would he got alcohol treatment
and now he's
for
dead.
free?
Yeah, there you go. He would have gotten alcohol treatment.
He would have got a nice apartment for really
Danny
low
would have
price.
psychological help, right?
Yeah, he could have lived at his, Yeah, that is true.
I would argue
the priority of his son's health and stuff too. That's very capitalist.
Yeah.
I would argue that with that, the overlook only exists because there's a certain class of people who can afford to apparently just spend the entire summer not working and living in this amazing mansion, and then they just sort of leave and go off, and that's a very not just a rich person thing. That's a a true capitalist billionaire class thing of I don't think it's a
Yes.
coincidence where they're like, it was built in the early 1900s when, America was going through the age of robber barons, and just like all of a sudden there's a bunch of people who don't have to actually work but can like just sort of come and sit in this amazing mansion while a bunch of workers are in their factories back in Chicago or whatever.
Yeah, they go in
yeah.
summer at the Overlook.
Exactly, right? I always say, like, if you use the word summer as a verb, like, you're gone. You're you're on a different plane of existence,
for
right?
you.
Yeah.
Gulag, sir.
Yeah. 50-year sentence.
That actually reminds me of like one of the like jokes. I can't remember it now, but like when the waiter like knocks into him and spills stuff on him, he specifically mentions like some ingredient or like a kind of liquor that I'd never heard of before. Yes, that's right. And like I hadn't heard of it. I like looked it up, and it's like this like, and it is like this sticky liqueur apparently that would like get on your shirt. I'm like, if there's this liquor that I've never heard of, like being drank in like these like this high society place, it's like, yeah, that sounds very fancy.
No.
Yeah. There's just another level of like, it's not even like they make the cheap knockoff stuff that normal
They don't have
people
peach
drink.
schnapps.
It's just like, oh no, this is only, yeah, right. This is only for like the people who are spending all of July in a mansion.
For the opulent.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then it leaves you on that photo like for a long period of time, like these smiling faces. Again, July 4th, 1921, like World War I has just recently, like the era of that photo is just, you'd have to be extremely wealthy to be able to be at that party.
For sure.
Yeah. And then it has Jack in the photo,
Yeah.
which the theory I read, but we can end on this, is that it's like he is the same person, like he is the spirit of, the previous person who murdered his family. Like it's kind of like he's the reincarnation of him, was the working theory I saw. I don't know.
That's cool.
Okay. That's yeah.
I like that.
Oh, because remember when he asked Grady, he's like, "Oh, you're the caretaker from before," or whoever it was, and he's like, "Not Grady, the other guy. Maybe it was Grady. I forgot." And he was like, "No, that's not me." He was like, "No, you were the caretaker." He's like, "Nope, I've always been here." So now,
Right.
like Jack has always been. He'll be like, yeah, makes
And
sense.
he also has that point with Wendy when he's like, I feel like, I've been here before and there's deja vu, but not like this.
Yes.
So,
He's like reliving his past.
Definitely.
Like these scenes are actually like him having been there literally before. That makes perfect sense. We got you,
Yeah,
Kubrick.
yeah.
Got you. We figured your shit out.
Gotcha, bitch.
figured you out.
But yeah, I don't
wish
think
he
I
was
have
here right
anything else. But I don't know. Has anyone? I know Jolly and Hugo, you have your. I'll link to your TikTok and Instagram for you Hugo's account. But I know you, Joe, have other publications, other things that you want to maybe tell everyone where they can find your work.
Yeah, definitely. So, I'll send you my TikTok account. But if I don't know, people like listening to my thoughts, they should go check out my Substack. It's called Joe Wrote. I write about everything this week, from how 401ks have been a tool to screw over workers, to tomorrow's publication is on how Saudi Arabia was involved in 9/11, and then on Friday I'm talking about sci-fi movies. So if any of that sounds good to you, it's Joe Wrote at Substack. I'll send you the link, Evan, so you can put it in the show
Yeah, I'll
notes.
put it down in the notes, and everyone can check out Jolly's excellent memes on TikTok for everyone. And Hugo, you got some other things too, right? Some shirts as well.
Oh yeah. My wife makes me these metal commie shirts. So I made an Instagram for them. It's called Seize the Means Shirts. So which is also just a way for me to post memes on Instagram, because my family follows me on my personal Instagram, and I don't want to tell them I'm a communist.
So I shouldn't send them this video when we're done. Is what you're saying?
No, please don't. Yes, and also sometimes my TikToks get posted on Instagram, and all of these people start following my personal Instagram, and it's just pictures of my wife and my dog. So I'm just like, I don't think you're interested in this. So Seize the Means Shirts, please.
Sweet. And and
Alright.
Jolly, your full one is the Jolly Leftist for anyone listening out there too. But yeah, it's been great to have you on. Thank you all for joining me.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks.
Yeah,
Evan.
thanks, Evan.
Absolutely. And so you've been listening to Left of the Projector, and you can follow this podcast on Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, not Facebook. That's really those